Thank you.
Good. We will proceed with the mimer. The blessing was talking about many different things. It's definitely on the theme of plant growth and the Jewish people compared to plants and to growing. And then we asked the question, how could it be that Hashem is, we make a home for Hashem in this world when Hashem is everywhere? And we explained that basically there are two lights of Hashem. There's the light of Hashem that fills all worlds, and there's the light of Hashem that is the transcendent light. And our job is to draw the transcendent light into the light that fills all worlds through our Jewish work. One of the ways we do that, we started talking about the idea of the 100 blessings. And the idea of the 100 blessings is that we're drawing from the Soved, from the transcendent into the reality of our world. And this is the theme of the bracha itself. So so every day of man is given to us, every human being is given 365 days. All of these days in order to draw down godly revelation through the 100 blessings, from the concealment into revelation. So that's 36,500 blessings a year. So going through the way the Alter Rebbe described the bracha, so now Rabbi Katz puts out that's the translator, puts forth how we're drawing the light from the infinite into our reality through the actual text of the blessing. It's very interesting because the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Torah has at least 6 different formulas or 6 different meditations on what the meaning of the bracha is, what this blessing means. And so, of course, there's there are the ideas of that correspond or are identical with parts of the bracha, but particularly in terms of the Baruch Ata, what does the Baruch Ata mean? So we said that Baruch, the Alter Rebbe described, or he compared the Baruch to the idea of a brecha, to a pond of water that is the revelation from a concealed source, right? So it's the way the waters come from the concealed into the revealed. I just learned that Brazil is the country with the most amount of fresh water. Did you know that that Brazil has the most fresh water of all up, more than Minnesota? Ha. How do you like that, Anne? Although it's called Minnesota, right? Meaning the land of well, that's Minneapolis, the city of water. Minnesota is the land of water.
Yeah, it's of 10,000 lakes.
And that's actually, there's more than 10,000.
Yes, it is. They are.
So what gives, and this we'll understand, what gives, where do all of this fresh water in Brazil comes from? It comes from the Amazon. So the Amazon is coming from this spring, from this source of water, this underneath water, and it flows in the river. But that underground water also gives rise to all of the other fresh water. And of course, in Minnesota, you also have the Mississippi. That would explain why in Minnesota you have all of this water. Of course, where does the Mississippi start?
It's probably Great Lakes, I would assume.
Actually starts, no, it doesn't. See, that's the tricky part. It's not coming from an above water source. It's coming from a beneath water source, and the spring in St. Croix, the St. Croix.
Oh, sure.
You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Ask me about the geography of Wisconsin, not so much, but Minnesota, I know a little bit more. The point being that when you see this water flowing, not coming from anywhere apparent, It's coming from an underwater, an underground source, right? That's where all of that water is coming from. How is that connected to a bracha? Because the idea of the baruch is bringing something from the concealed into the revealed. You understand? Right? So that's the baruch, blessed, the source of blessing, the hidden source of the light as it encompasses all worlds, but it now becomes revealed, the way the Alter Rebbe describes. And how does it become revealed?
Rabbi, their water actually is coming from an underground spring.
An underground spring starting in the St. Croix. Yes. I think St. Croix is actually the name of the underground spring. Bruce, did you just Google that?
Did not.
Okay. All right. Good. We want to keep this fair.
I'm keeping it as fair as possible. All it is knowledge.
All it is knowledge. So Baruch is the way that it's coming from the hidden source into a revealed state. How does it come into a revealed state? The Alter Rebbe explained through the word Ata. This is the permeating light that we see directly. In other words, we see the manifestation through existence. And we call it you. The word you doesn't really help, but it's Ata. Ata is Aleph, Taf, Hey. Aleph, Taf are all of the letters of the alphabet, and the Hey are the 5 parts of the mouth used in speech. And so we're drawing from the concealed into the revealed through words, through these divine words, not through the divine words, sorry. This is the manifestation of God into existence to bring everything about, right? So Ata is referring to that divine light, basically the world of Malchus, or the Sphira of Malchus that brings everything about. This light comes through a process of Yud K Vav K. So anytime we have the name Yud K Vav K, so Chassidus explains that Yud K Vav K, the 4-letter name of Hashem, we also refer to it as Havaya. So Havaya is the description of the way that information comes from the source and is drawn down to the lowest level. And so if you have a great genius who wants to explain something to a kindergarten child, for example, the first thing he has to do is he has to contract all of his knowledge into a singular point, and that's the Yud of the name of God. And then it expands. It gets length and width. And then the Vav is the depth. Now it's coming down to a level. Now we have depth. And then it expands in the lower level, and that's the lower Hey. And then Elokeinu, this process of drawing down Hashem's light, is specifically through the Jewish people saying 100 blessings, since they have the power of self-sacrifice for Hashem. As the Alter Rebbe says, he's Elokeinu, our God, meaning that he's our God and we're willing to give up our life for him. This is the sanctity of every Jewish soul. And then he becomes Melech HaOlam, the king of the world, through this process of the Jewish people drawing down Hashem's encompassing light until it reaches the level of being a permeating light. That is how Hashem expresses his kingship in the creation, sustaining and rulership over, the authority over the created beings in our world. And this is the Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu Melech HaOlam. That is the of course, the language that we recite whenever we say a bracha. And we recite this 100 times a day. And it's all the process of bringing from the highest level of the divine into the reality of our world. And the Alter Rebbe explain. Any questions, comments? The Alter Rebbe continues, now these 100 blessings are fulfilled through speech, right? We recite the blessing in dibur, in speech. But how do they draw godliness from concealment to revelation into the physical objects of this world? That is by performing the actions of mitzvahs. using the analogy of sowing seeds of plants, where most of the planting is from garden vegetation, the seeds of which are not eaten since they are inedible. Most things that we eat are going to be, the seeds are inedible. However, when these seeds are planted in the soil and the ground's latent potential for growth enters the seed, edible fruits grow, even though the seed itself was not edible whatsoever. There are also kernels of grain which are edible, but nevertheless, by planting them, the grain becomes quantitatively and qualitatively greater. So now we're going to apply all of this to the mitzvos. This whole analogy of planting a seed and growing forth exponentially is going to be applied to a mitzvah. And remember, we said above that the good deeds of the righteous, these are their peiros, or not the righteous, of every person, right? Every human being, the mitzvahs that they do, these are their peiros. These are called their fruit. So similarly, with regard to performing mitzvahs, which is Hashem's will, as it is implanted in physical objects, such as tefillin written on physical parchment, tzitzis made from physical wool, and similarly with other mitzvahs. And when a Jewish person lays these tefillin on his head, this generates a revelation of Hashem's godliness. So all one needs to do is to take this box, right, the box of the tefillin, put it on the head, and now you're going to bring a revelation of Hashem's godliness in the world. What's inside of the tefillin? The section of tefillin with the passage of Kadesh. That's the first section in the tefillin. So the passage of Kadesh. So the first paragraph in the tefillin is Kadesh li kol bechor Peter kol rechem b'nei Yisrael. This is in Exodus chapter 13, right? Sanctify for me every firstborn, for both human and animal. And this is the section that talks about the Exodus from Egypt. So the passage of Kadesh written in it reveals the chachma of Atzilus, the level of divine wisdom. And the section of the passage of V'haya ki yiviacha, which is right afterwards, and also in chapter 13, it reveals the bina of Atzilus. So these are the two chapters, the tefillin. Let me show you. Let's see which box. Here's the Shal Yad. Here's the Shal Rosh. So many of you may know this already, but so here we have this is not a kosher pair of tefillin, but we see the four different sections there. These are four little tiny boxes, four different, and if you open it up, you might be able to see inside there four compartments. One is missing. So each one is another section of the Torah. So when you see the tefillin and you see the head tefillin in particular, you see the four different lines there. That's not symbolic. Those are actually four different compartments for the four different sections of the Torah, the four different parchments that each parchment concludes by saying, put these on your arm and on your head. So the head tefillin corresponds to the divine intellect, which is chachma, bina, and dat. And when we put on the head tefillin, we are becoming a conduit for this level of, we're bringing into a revelation the divine wisdom into the world. That is why when somebody's putting on tefillin, they cannot remove their mind from the tefillin. A person cannot joke around in tefillin or do anything of levity or frivolity, right? It's a person has to keep their mind focused on tefillin. It's a very, it's a halacha in the tefillin itself. So going back to the point here. So all of the levels of Atzilus, of the spiritual world of Atzilus, are godliness. And by physically putting on tefillin, a Jew reveals in himself the divine level of Chachma and Bina of Atzilus. Wow. So that's what's happening when somebody does tefillin, or, every mitzvah is going to have its level of divine revelation that's becoming manifest through performance of the mitzvah. Yisrael, please.
Since this is a mitzvah, say Zman Gorma, and women don't have a chiyuv, how do women connect with Hashem?
The way the Arizal, well, first of all, this is not saying that we connect to Hashem this way. Rather, this is the way that we draw godliness of the divine intellect into the world. And so the purpose of drawing the divine intellect into the world, this is done through the men folk, and it covers the women folk as well, as the Arizal says. So when men are putting on tefillin, this also fulfills the obligation for the women folk. I mean, a similar thing is said with regard to bris milah, right? Circumcision. So there's a very specific level of divine revelation of godliness that's coming into the world. So we know that one of the ways of referring to the Jewish people are the B'nai. Have you ever heard of B'nai Brith? You've heard of B'nai Brith. B'nai Brith is basically B'nai Brit, that we are people of the covenant. Well, certainly there are many covenants that were made with the Jewish people, but even the Brit of Brit Milah, of circumcision, applies to women equally to men. Now, nobody's going to ask the question, well, women don't have that part, they can't have that mitzvah, but nevertheless, it's the mitzvah that the men are doing in this particular scenario it's all encompassing, just like mitzvah that the women do, although they're far fewer. They're covering the men with the mitzvah that they're doing. It's not like individuated that like we said above, that everyone has to do all of the mitzvot. There are mitzvot that the men do, and this covers all of the women in that process, because you know why? Because we're one people. And just like in the temple, there were the things that the Kohanim did, and each group of Kohanim, everybody had their specific job. And each of those things become replicated by what women do in their home, with lighting the Shabbat candles, which is the idea of the menorah, and the making of the challah, which is like the 12 loaves of the showbread in the Holy Temple. And Tarat HaMishpacha, family purity, that corresponds to the Holy of Holies, and the cloud of glory that becomes revealed therein.
So Limud Torah would fall into the same category, right?
By and large, not entirely so, but mostly yes. Men are obligated. When are men obligated to study Torah? Right? The obligation for men to study Torah does not stop. You have to go to work, you can stop and go to work. You have to go to sleep, you have to eat, right? You can stop and do all of these things. But the obligation to study Torah is consistently upon men. But this is an old story, Yisrael. This is nothing new. So we're going to go forward with the mimer, right? I mean, this is, and all of these mitzvot that he's talking about, it's these are mitzvot that apply to the men. Men are the ones who do it, but the light that's brought forth is brought forth for the women as well. It's not, no woman loses out because of not doing these mitzvot.
Sir?
Yeah.
Women are allowed to study Torah, right?
Sure. Women are
And what
women are obligated to study certain aspects of the Torah.
But you're obligated, but we're allowed to go further and study the whole, study
Right,
as much as
right.
we can.
But women are obligated to study what they need to know, right, for halachot that they need to know. And even Chassidic philosophy, the Rebbe says women are obligated to study Chassidic philosophy because to fulfill mitzvot of loving God, having an awe of God, a trepidation, and other mitzvot associated with our relationship with God, women have to do this just as much as men, and so they're obligated in the study of Chassidus. But other areas as well, you're right. Other areas women are permitted to study.
But I read somewhere that Rashi's daughters put on tefillin. Is that was permitted?
This is a common story.
Is that permitted? It's not permitted, really, is it? It's taking on a garment that's meant for a man.
It depends. It depends how you define is.
It's permitted to
Let
be the
Clinton
daughter.
figure that out.
All right. Let's you know, I don't know that Rashi's daughters put on tefillin. That's the story. That's the story. You know, if they put on tefillin, I'm sure it was permitted. You know, but I don't know. I don't know that we know for a fact. Is it prohibited for a woman to put on tefillin? I don't know. I mean, it's a complicated topic. It's not so simple. There are many different aspects, many different facets of the discussion, which takes us far afield from what we're doing here.
It's not a requirement for sure.
That's for sure, right? Okay. So, all right. So we see, and here the Rebbe is talking about how through the physical mitzvot that we perform, we're actually drawing godliness into the world in particular ways. And so through putting on tefillin, we're actually drawing the divine intellect into revelation in the world. And as the Zohar states regarding the mitzvah, tzitzis atalis is the cloak of the king. It reveals in the person the level of malchus, of kingship, of atzilus, of Hashem's divinity. As we learned in chapter 41 of Tanya, it says there that there's a mitzvah in the Torah that you have to place upon yourself a king. And the metaphoric reading of that is that we have to place upon ourselves the authority of God's kingship. And we do that physically through the talus. The talus is the idea of, it's the cloak of the king. It's the cloak that reminds us of the authority of the king that is upon us. Now, this revelation happens only when a Jew puts those head tefillin on his head. So going back to the mitzvah of tefillin, so the tefillin, sometimes we look at the tefillin and we look at it and we think, oh, that's a mitzvah. Well, it's actually not a mitzvah, as the Alter Rebbe says. But when one lays them on the table, this does not generate any revelation whatsoever. Even though a Jew's forehead is also physical, just like the table. And likewise, if a non-Jew dons the tefillin, no revelation will stem from this act. Meaning, as in the analogy of the latent power of growth in the earth, that a fruit will not grow in every place, such as a desert where vegetation does not grow at all. Similarly, the Torah writes only regarding Yisrael, the Atem Li Eretz Chefetz. Again, we are called the desirable land, the land in which these perot, these fruits, can blossom forth.
In Israel, it blossoms in the desert too.
There are, but not apples.
Not apples, not peaches either.
Meaning, as is known, that the Ein Sof, the Infinite One, is referred to as Kadosh, sacred and apart, and I, Hashem, have not changed. And you are the ones prior to the creation of the world, and you are the one following the creation of all, and all will exalt you forever. basically the Alter Rebbe is now saying and explaining a point that is a common theme, which is Hashem himself is unchanged by the creation of the universe. We look at the universe and we say, wow, how vast, how amazing is this universe? It's unbelievable. And there's spiritual levels beyond and beyond, right, that we can't even imagine. But all of this, Hashem, after creating all of this, Hashem himself is unchanged. He's the same Hashem, and we've done this before. We've done this calculation before. So you have all of existence is happening within Hashem, right? So now if you take Hashem plus the universe equals Hashem, meaning that the whole value of all of existence to Hashem is he is nothing. And this is what we mean that the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light, is referred to as Kadosh, sacred and apart. He's unchanged by all of existence. So now the question is, how can you go from that lofty level where everything is nothing before him? How can you bring it about? How can you bring all of this existence about? You'd have to have some kind of relationship with it in order to make it happen. So what Kabbalah and Chassidus explain is now to bring the worlds into existence is only with your Malchus kingship, which is creating the kingship of all worlds. There is no king without a nation, and that is why we can only praise your name forever, since its essence is beyond our grasp and understanding to praise it. All right, so we've spoken about this before, that there's this idea of the name of Hashem, which is related and associated with this level of Malchut, which is the authority of Hashem. But these things are very, very far from the essence of Hashem himself. Although Hashem is totally one and united, everything, it's all united with Hashem. But nevertheless, in terms of the quality, of when we say higher and lower, of course, we mean, the level of quality of the name, the way that we would refer to Hashem within any name whatsoever is far beyond Hashem himself. And in order to bring about all of existence, so God had to, so to speak, express this element of Malchut, of authority, and this idea of a name. And this is why with the Jewish people, we're preoccupied with God's name, right? Even how do we refer to God? We refer to him as Hashem, the name. So just in our regular language of referring to God, we Baruch Hashem, the name. May the name be blessed, right? Baruch, and somebody says a blessing, you say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo. Blessed is he, and blessed is his name. Why do we say blessed is he, and blessed is his name? Because he is referring to the level of God that's beyond us. Then Baruch Shemo, the way that God, so to speak, relates to us. So the whole idea of the name of Hashem becomes the relating aspect, and that's connected to the Malchus, to God being the authority, right? And all of this is in order, of course, to bring everything about. So it explains here, Hashem's name represents his attribute of Malchus, kingship, since the name of itself is only for other people to call. It isn't needed for the person by himself. Similarly, the attribute of kingship is how Hashem relates to created beings by giving them existence in life. Now, in the analogy of a king, he transforms the people around him from feeling themselves as something important to feeling like nothing of independent importance, since all of his subjects nullify their ego before him. He's going to explain this in a moment. So anybody who has any standing before the king, everyone becomes nullified. Similarly, above in divinity, there is no king without a nation. So what does a nation mean? Very interesting. Chassidus brings this idea of Am from the etymology of omimot, meaning dimmed, which refers to one whose revealed connection to his source is dimmed, and therefore he feels himself as independent and connected. So basically, in order to have a king, you need to have a nation. In other words, you have to have subjects that feel themselves to be separate entities. But then the purpose of this is to create someone who has his own ego and then is able to surrender and nullify his ego to Hashem by his own free will. As it's written, with regard to the angels, the legions of heaven bow to you. The problem is, however, angels are not so separate from Hashem as much as us. In other words, they don't have free. What do we mean they're not so separate? The fact is the difference between an angel to Hashem, in Hashem's eyes, in spiritual level, right? That level is like nothing. But that's not what we're talking about. The idea is that an angel can't really go against Hashem. So they're not so separate from him because the angel does not have agency to do its own thing. However, it is specifically the Jewish people in this world who are in a situation of total spiritual darkness, which creates a strong feeling of separation from their source. That's why it's possible. I don't know if you've ever had this experience. Have you ever had the experience that you're saying, "Blessed be your name forever, our God, who is great, who is holy." You're saying all of these amazing words, and your mind is thinking about, what you're going to eat for lunch. Have you ever, during davening, thought about what you're going to eat, like later on, or something else, a trip you were going to go on, or a trip you wanted to go on? Have you ever been distracted? No, I'm not this group. Okay, it doesn't work with this group. Nobody here has ever been distracted during davening. That's good. It's a good group. So how can that happen? Because we're in a state of spiritual darkness. That's why when we go to daven, we have to battle that darkness. And sometimes we battle it better than other times, right? And it creates a strong feeling of separation from our source. And nevertheless, what do? We bring our focus back to our davening and we put the stream of consciousness aside and we focus on the main thing, which is praising Hashem, for example. So this is where the main expression of Hashem's kingship is revealed through the nullification of ego from something feeling itself as something having independent importance to feeling that it is nothing separate and independent from Hashem. In other words, in order for Hashem to be the king, we need two things. You need something that feels itself as separate and independent, and that things that's separate and independent nullifies itself to Hashem's will. So the angels have number two. They nullify themselves to Hashem's will, but they don't feel themselves as being something separate in their own separate entity. So it's specifically the human being that has the capacity. So every time you see somebody talking, about non-belief in God or something that's not in line, right? Or all of the craziness that you hear today, people talking and say, right, this is the world that God created, a world of darkness where human beings can come to the absolutely false conclusions. But yet, I have the ability to choose the path of Hashem. This is what we mean by proclaiming Hashem as the king. We were given the ability to not do so. Right. So if somebody would come along and force everyone to accept him, so Chassidus refers to that person not as a king, but maybe as a moshel, as a ruler, or a despot, or a tyrant, but not a melech. A melech is a person. The word melech is associated with the Hebrew. Etymologically, it's related to the word lihi malech, which means to consult. How do you say, to consult is lihi malech, from the same word as melech. So there has to be, and what does consultation means? Means that you're getting somebody else's opinion on the matter, right? So it's not enough for a person to think that they're the king. The people have to have that, their own opinion about that, and they have to choose the person as the king. Malchuto v'ratzon kiblu alehem. That his authority of kingship they accepted willingly upon themselves. That is what makes Hashem the king. We've spoke about this a little bit in some of the previous pieces in Tanya. So in other words, it's the ability, and this is a key point here, is that the ability for us to really make Hashem as the king is contingent on the fact that initially we see ourselves as our own independent entities. But then we bend that to the truth of the king. And so the Rebbe says, this is not the case regarding a son who is considered like the leg of his father. This is, where is this from? Bra Kara Davua, quoted from the Talmud, I believe, that basically the son is like considered to be just like an extension of the father. So if you have progeny, if you have all of your kids and your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, you have the whole tribe, they can't make you the king because they're family, they're mishpacha. This is why Jewish souls above cannot make Hashem a king, since they're always bound above, meaning the way that the Jewish soul is above in the spiritual realm cannot make Hashem as a king, since there, in that place, they are always bound up with Hashem and have no ego. Only Jewish souls in the physical body of this world who have an ego can make Hashem as the king. And therefore, specifically you, that's what it says in the verse above. You, the Jewish people, will be a desirable land. You, the Jewish people, will be a desirable land, since it is only in them that the inner desire and will of Hashem can sprout forth to fruition. And it is specifically through Yisrael performing physical mitzvot that the aforementioned sprouting and growth can occur. This is the meaning of the verse. A wife who fears Hashem, she will be praised. You guys remember that from Eshet Chayil? Isha yirat Hashem hititalal. Right? Sheker hachein vehevel hayofi. Isha yirat Hashem hititalal. Okay? So this is from King Solomon in Mishlei and Proverbs. So what does he say? A wife who fears Hashem, she will be praised. Hashem is referred to as the groom, and the Knesset Yisrael, the souls of the Jewish people, are referred to as the bride. The bride who is the wife who fears Hashem. This refers to the fact that the Jewish people, the wife of Hashem, create in themselves a feeling of awe, putting themselves aside for Hashem. And through this awe and nullification of ego, she is praised. She brings forth a ray of godly revelation. Did you know? Wow, this is another amazing Chassidic etymology here. The word hallel, to praise, comes from the expression of vihilu. You know what? Maybe it's connected to the Greek to a halo. I don't know. Helium. Let's see what the etymology of helium is. What is the etymology of helium? Well, it's connected to Helios, to the sun. So that's a little related to the idea of light, right? But that's going to be also like a halo, right? So this is all the idea of these ancient words meaning light. So Hallel means to bring forth that light. We find it in the pasuk in Eov that Behilo Nero, when he will shine his lamp on my head. So the word is used that way in Tanakh, in the book of Eov. So the idea of just 1 second, Moshe. So the idea of Hallel, of Titalel, is really praising Hashem, but that means that praising of Hashem is bringing forth the light of Hashem into the world. Yes, Moshe, please.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to deviate, but helio also is with helicopter, which is a helio. I don't know how they got its name, because it's not quite like a light. It's a. I mean, I don't understand, how it got the prefix
Could be a
helio.
different origin, etymology of helicopter.
Heliocopter. I've heard it be called heliocopter, but
So it comes from the word helix,
helix. I see.
which is a spiral.
I see.
Now, I'm no expert in Greek, but I'm an expert in doing a Google search.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Sometimes words sound the same, but they actually have different, they're just different origins. Especially when you connect them to make them a, prefix, you wouldn't necessarily know.
I see.
And I don't know that halo comes from that either. It was just my assumption, but I could be wrong. But helium does come from that, from the sun, from light. So I'm just assuming that there's some kind of association here. It's always nice to find when you find an English word that has some origin in Hebrew language. It's not a common usage of the word. I don't know that there's any other word in the entire Tanakh, the word Hallel, Hilo, to mean light. Just need one. There we have it. So Behilo Nero. So through our efforts to come to fear Hashem and what does it mean to come to fear Hashem? Specifically, not because it's natural, not because it's easy, not because I'm in the mood for it, but putting our ego aside when it's not easy, I'm not in the mood to do it, but I put it aside to fulfill His will. We reveal Hashem's kingship in ourselves and in the entire world, which is tremendously great revelation. Panamayish. So there's a very beautiful idea that we can take away from this. Sometimes we're not in the mood to serve Hashem. Has anybody ever been in that situation of not being in the mood to serve Hashem? Not in the mood.
There's a lot of interference.
Yeah, I'm going to turn it off. Has anyone ever been in that situation of not being in the mood to serve Hashem? We all have, right? So when we're not in the mood to serve Hashem, we have to think to ourselves just for a moment, say, this is the exact point when I can serve Hashem, right? This is the real point that Hashem is looking for when I'm not in the mood. I'm sure Hashem appreciates when we're in the mood and everything is good and fine. But it's specifically when we're not feeling it so much, and we're not, for whatever reasons, maybe health, maybe there was a situation, maybe whatever it could be, right? There could be 100 different reasons why we're not in the mood, and it's a difficult thing. But that's exactly the point, that in that moment we say, you know what, I'm just going to push it aside. Sometimes in davening, I'll do this. I will, I say, you know what? I'm sitting here, my mind is wandering, and not only, it's not only that it's hard to focus, that I don't necessarily even want to focus. If those days where you don't even want to focus, you just want to just go through what you have to do, and enough focusing already. And then I'll say, you know what? I'm going to offer to Hashem one pasuk in davening. I'm going to offer one pasuk, okay? How about one pasuk? 12 seconds, 18 seconds maximum. I'm going to offer Hashem one pasuk in davening while I'm thinking of what I'm saying. I'm going to focus on one pasuk. Who can say that I can't take 18 seconds to make an offering to Hashem, right? That's, even our evil inclination has to agree with that. So you make an offering of one thing. Then you've made one offering, and maybe it felt a little good, and say, you know what, I'm going to offer another pasuk. I'm going to offer another verse, another line, or dealing with with ourselves, with people, with our spouse, dealing with other people. And you know what, I'm going to take 5 minutes of being a nice person and trying to listen and hear where the other person is coming from without giving a sarcastic response. Talk about self-sacrifice, right? Not being sarcastic for 5 minutes, right? The point is that specifically when we are not in the mood. That's my point. You see, that's where the growth happens. We as human beings, we're accustomed to thinking that we have to be in the mood. I don't know where we get this from. We have to be in the mood in order to do something. But really, anything happens, any change of who we are and what we do really happens when we're not in the mood. That's when the change is happening. This is the service that Hashem desires from us. That's what he's describing here of really creating that light, that an independent entity that could have gone and ignored the presence of Hashem says Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu, right? And goes and praises Hashem. So through our efforts to come to a fear of Hashem, putting our ego aside, our ego really is you know what ego stands for? They say EGO, edging God out. That's not the etymology, Moshe, don't worry. But ego, edging God out, right? And it stands for all of negativity in our mind, right? Our unwillingness to submit to Hashem. So putting our ego aside to fulfill his will, we reveal Hashem's kingship in ourselves, and in as much as we are part of the world and part of the universe, so we are revealing Hashem's kingship in the entire world, which is a tremendously great revelation. So we become the conduit for that revelation through the work that we do, through the mitzvahs that we do. And this is the meaning, now going back to the beginning, the first verse. So if you remember the questions, so why was it Haboim Yashresh Yaakov? So this is a verse from Isaiah. Haboim Yashresh Yaakov, Porach V'Yotzitz Yisrael. Is that how the verse started? Something like that. This is the meaning of the phrase. So when the Jewish people came down to Egypt, remember someone shared with us there at the beginning that this is Rashi's commentary, that this verse is referring to the Jewish people descending to Egypt. This is the meaning of the phrase, the family of Yaakov who came into Egypt caused them the mitzvahs to take root. Meaning, the Jewish people below in this world caused the mitzvahs to take root, referring to the mitzvahs which descended from Hashem's will to become invested into physical objects. So when we're doing the mitzvah, we're not just doing an action, we're actually planting something that has roots into the physicality of this world. And this is the idea of calling the Jewish people Yaakov, because what does Yaakov represent? It's the letters of Yud Akev, another metaphor that Chassidus explains based on the name of Yaakov. So Akev is the heel, the lowest part of the body. The Yud is referring to wisdom, which is the highest faculty of the human being. So which are the letters of Yud? Akev, the letter Yud, which represents Chachma, wisdom that descends below to the level of the heel, representing the lowly physical. So the Jewish people in this physical world are called Akev, the heel of all levels, bringing down the level of Yud, the highest level of Hashem's wisdom that contains his inner desire and will for the mitzvahs, into this physical world through their actual performance of them. This is why they're referred to in this verse as Yaakov, because Yaakov is our work of taking the highest level of divine wisdom and bringing it down into the lowest level, into the Akev, into the heel. And what happens when we achieve this through the fulfillment of the mitzvahs? As a result, Yisrael flourished and blossomed. They budded and they blossomed. Yotzitz ufarach Yisrael. Like emerging, like budding, like a plant, like a flower that buds and blossoms, like emerging and blossoming from the concealment into revealed state. So the sowing of the mitzvahs in this world in the time of Galus and exile, specifically in Egypt, in the manner of Yaakov, taking the highest level of divine wisdom contained in the mitzvos and bringing it down into the physicality of the world. We reap the harvest of the revelation of those mitzvahs at the time of the Geula redemption, when we'll be on the level of Yisrael. And this is the meaning of the daily Shachris prayer, when we say, for he who sows righteousness, salvation sprouts. We say that in the blessing before the Shema, the blessing of the Shema. We say, Zoreat tzedakot matzmiach yeshuot. Through sowing, which represents the doing of the mitzvahs, and giving tzedakah, it is for our benefit and causes salvation to sprout forth, for surely Hashem himself could have provided for the poor. Listen to this line. But it is only in order to give us the merit of accomplishing the sprouting of salvation that he made some people require receiving charity from us, which brings the true power and nature of the mitzvahs into revelation from their state of concealment through our performance of the mitzvahs. This is, by the way, just a whole other aside, and that is when you have a situation where you have to take care of somebody, maybe because they ask you for money, maybe because you know them, maybe they're a family member, and sometimes you think, that's the last thing I want to have to deal with. It's the last thing you want to have to deal with, and the first thing that Hashem wants you to have to deal with. And it isn't a punishment, God forbid. It isn't even a burden. It's actually a zechus. It's actually a merit. Why is it that so many things in life that are the greatest merit are wrapped up in something that sometimes we feel like a burden? Well, that's a good question. To give us the ability to emerge from our slumber and realize the great zechus, the great merit that we have. And this is the intent of what King David HaMelech says in Tehillim of every, it says in verse, in chapter 119, L'chol tichla ra'iti kates. Of every tichla here is referring to a desire, I have seen the end, but your commandments are exceedingly broad. So his intent in a desire is not only that there's a limit to material desires, but there's also a limit to the spiritual desire for divine wisdom. In other words, even if a person's whole desire is just in Hashem and in spirituality, there's still a concealment, or there's still a limitation. There's an end to that. Whereas to the mitzvahs, the mitzvahs are very broad. And for the klot hanefesh, for the desire of our soul to return to our source in Hashem, as in the expression, my soul yearns for Hashem, this yearning to connect with Hashem has an end and a limit. For every soul has a limit in its spiritual attainment and understanding. That's all the level of the spiritual seeking and spiritual aspirations. But the mitzvahs, however, your commandments are exceedingly broad, meaning that Hashem's mitzvahs are broad in their capacity to receive the unlimited revelation of Hashem, since through performing mitzvahs, this causes an unlimited revelation of Hashem. An unlimited revelation of Hashem. This is why even though spiritual desire and yearning have a limit, but your mitzvahs are exceedingly broad. Does he say the reason? Doesn't explain here why. And this is the meaning of the verse, fortunate are you who sow upon all waters. Every level of understanding of Hashem's revelation that can be attained in the upper and lower. Gan Eden is called water, as the verse says, and a river flows forth from Eden to give water to Gan Eden. However, regarding the physical mitzvahs, their planting is upon the waters, meaning they're higher, they're above and beyond all the levels of the waters, which refer to the graspable revelations. Similarly, by learning Torah, which also descended to become invested in concepts relating to physical objects, we also effect an exponential growth through this. So here, the Rebbe says not only mitzvahs, but also the study of Torah. Therefore, our sages said in Baba Basra, fortunate is he who arrives here with his Torah. He arrives in Gan Eden, in paradise, after a person passes away. Seemingly, this is a wonder, since above speech of the Torah discussing physical things is completely unnecessary. So you're studying in Torah about an ox that gores a cow and a donkey, and that's what you should. That's the information you need in paradise and in the presence basking in Hashem's glory. So he says here, these are. So this is what you need in heaven. However, for the seed to sprout, it needs specifically rooted and absorbed into the earth, and only then can it grow. All right, we'll continue with this idea of the Torah study next time, God willing. But questions, comments, insights, disagreements?
Rabbi, excuse me, I have a question. It's probably a little bit off of this topic, but it's very much, I think, part of the core of Hasidus, and that is that if Hashem is infinite, okay, and there are 4 worlds within that that infinite space, okay, each of those worlds, by definition, must have a boundary. But how can you have things with a boundary in infinite space?
Okay, so first of all, your question is a correct question. Just some of the terminologies here. The worlds are not a physical space, nor are they, in the higher worlds, you don't really even have space. It's not space. It's not a physical dimensions. They have dimensions. They have a measurement. In other words, if they have a definition, what is the definition, or the etymology of definition? Define means finite, right? Finite. Define means to make something finite. Because if it doesn't have a particular meaning, that it means this and not that, then you don't have a definition, right? So definition, these worlds have definitions. So that they have a metric, they have a measurement, they are of a dimension. So your question is, how does God, who's beyond any dimension whatsoever, come and become manifest into a dimension? Is that your question?
Yes, that's my question.
It's a very good question, and it's it's a deep and broad question. But I'm going to give you an idea shared by Rabbi Meir ibn Gabbai, a 14th century Kabbalist, and he says the following idea: the Ein Sof, the infinite light of the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light of Hashem, infinite, right? Does it have the power of finite in it, or not? Trick question. He says it has to have the power of finite. Because if you say that Hashem is the power of infinite, but not the power of finite, then he's lacking something. Like some rabbis, they have the ability, they can speak infinitely, but do they know when to stop speaking, right? This is also an important skill. I mean,
these are the kind of concepts that are very challenging to my finite mind.
Well, we don't. Here's the good news. You don't have to grasp it. It's not. Yeah, it's a very lofty idea, and how does that really happen? And how do the world of Atzilus, which is the way that God comes into information, understanding? It's the craziest thing. Yeah, Moshe, please.
Rabbi, Ein Sof, the light of Hashem. Well, when it comes into existence in the form of a nace, I think that's the finite that we're seeing when we actually see a miracle taking place right here before us.
That's a glimmer.
Exemplifies.
It's a glimmer, infinite. But even a miracle is going to be in a particular way that's totally beyond the nature that we know, but it's still going to be in a particular way. So that's something that's, shall we say, more beyond coming into our natural world, and that we can understand. Mordechai, please.
Yeah, before one part of the thing, we were talking about Hashem's name, Yeah, before saying Kasser on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we say, your name befits you, and you befit your name, and our name is called by your name.
Right. Yeah, very beautiful, right? So there's this association, right? That's why the Jewish people are, there's this close, intimate relationship between the name of God and the Jewish people. The truth is that our relationship goes beyond that, beyond the name. But very, very beautifully put.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Right. You're very welcome. Good to see everyone. Everyone stay healthy, stay happy. We'll see you, God willing, next week at this time.
Thank you,
Amen.
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Welcome. Bye-bye.